online, everybody who's here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little bit of background and information on what the problem is, and then we're going to talk and discuss it, because I think that's probably the best way to get information is to talk about it and get everybody's feedback. I think it's very critical. The people online as well as the people here. Why do kids use drugs? I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and you know, the question constantly is asked by everybody. Everybody wants the magic bullet, you know, why do kids use drugs? You know? There's probably as many answers to that as there's kids who use drugs. Everybody has a different reason why they use drugs. Mainly, the main reason people use drugs is to escape reality. You know, that they say drugs are for people who hate reality, and it's true. The minute you take a mood-altering substance or a drug that changes your reality, you no longer have to deal with what's going on in your life. And a lot of kids, begin, like I said, because their reality may not be, that they don't have any money, or they don't have any resources, or they don't have any toys, or they don't have any friends. I mean, that's some kids' reality, but not all of them. The kids that Peggy was talking about, they have everything. Seemingly on the outside, they have everything that anybody could want. And I think the problem is that a lot of parents believe that because these kids are smart, and because they have a lot of information, that they have knowledge. And that's the problem. Information is not knowledge. When you take information and you marry it with experience, you put it together with experience, then you have knowledge. And I think that's what parents are for, to provide that experience. Sometimes you don't have the information. You just quickly to go around the room and figure out whether we have the information or not. How many people in this room know what Ultra is? Anybody? You know what Ultra is? What is Ultra?
You're talking about the concert that's coming up?
Yeah, well, it's going to be here tomorrow through Sunday, yes, in Miami.
Several different stages, several different groups, house music.
It's basically,
lots of chaos, lots of
basically a drug orgy that's going to be happening on Bayfront Park for the next 3 days. But a lot of parents don't know that. A lot of parents hear about Ultra and they hear, oh, it's a music fest, oh, it's so and such DJ that's coming down from such and such place, and they're my favorite DJ, and they're going to do one set, and I'm going to go see it, and that's the end of that. But that's not what's going to be happening there. It's going to be 3 days of constant 24-hour day, 7-day-a-week drug use. And these kids are going to be going there, and the interesting part about this is when we talk about resources and assets and kids having these resources. I mean, an Ultra ticket is $600. A lot of parents don't know that. I mean, that's not what they originally sell for. I mean, when they first come out on the market, they're about $140. But by the time they hit the streets and by the time they're sold and resold, they reach up to about $600, $650, depending on where you want to be. So what kind of resources does it take for a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid to come up with that kind of money? Well, they got to get it from somewhere, and I think they get it from their parents. And I think they get it from their parents because the parents are not very well informed about what this thing is. And I think that's what the problem is. If we don't have information, and if we don't continually update our information, then we're not going to be able to help our kids. And it's interesting because I've been talking to parents for many, many years. I've been doing this for so many years. And you talk to a parent about a fever, or you talk to a parent about any type of medical problem, and they sound like Wikipedia. They have so much information. Okay, you got to do this, and you got to do that, and you got to take this medication, that medication, or you got to reach out and call this doctor. But all of a sudden, you talk about drug use. You talk about blues, and you talk about beanies, and you talk about trolling, and you talk about tripping, and they have no clue what's going on. The kids talk about rolling in Ultra because that's a very popular thing to do in Ultra, and everybody thinks that they're going to be rollerblading around the whole place. No, rolling is the use of ecstasy. This is what it's called. Trolling is when you take ecstasy and you mix it with acid, and you go on a trip that they call trolling. This is very popular on the beach. There's so many drugs out there and so many different names that every parent that doesn't have this information is at a disadvantage. Just like if your kid has a cold or a high temperature, if you don't have any information about that, you're at a disadvantage. I tell parents all the time, take CPR classes. And they look at me like I'm from Mars. I mean, why would a parent take a CPR class these days? Well, it could be the difference between life and death for your child. That's a sad statement to make, that as parents we have to go out and get CPR training, but in the past year alone I've dealt with 5 OD cases, where kids OD'd in their own houses, and the parents were the ones that found them, and if they would have known CPR, those kids would have made it. And unfortunately they didn't, because by the time the rescue got there, they found them 3, 4, 5 hours later into the process, and by that time it was too late. So information is key, and this is what Informed Families is about. It's about providing information. This is what this group is about, and this is why I've been involved with this group for over 20 years. This is why I serve on the board. This is why I come to these things when they ask me to. I never say no. I always show up. I show up because I think it's important. I think that the biggest weapon in any arsenal that a parent can have is information. And I go to schools all the time and I talk to parents. Obviously, this is very funny because I go and they announce this for weeks on end that I'm going to be there, right? And they make this whole, the trust counselor or the person in charge of that process, they get all excited. They have literature, they give it to the kids, they get everybody excited. But I know, because I've been there many, many times, that I'm going to show up there and it's going to be 5, 10 people. And I know that I'm going to be preaching to the choir. The people there know more about what I'm talking about than I do. They do the research. They actually take the time to get the information they need to help their kids. Other parents think, oh, my kid is smart. My kid gets great grades. They're not going to need this. They got it figured out. They know drugs are bad. I mean, everybody knows that, right? Nancy Reagan, say no to drugs. We got it. We figured it out a long time ago. But it's not that simple. Information alone is not enough to stop this problem. Information alone is not enough. So what do we need? We need parents to provide the experiences. Because I don't know any parent that's grown up in this country, that's gone through the high school system in this country, through the college system in this country, and doesn't know anything about drugs. If you did, I want to talk to you. If you never saw drugs in high school and you grew up in this country, if you never saw drugs in college, I want to talk to you because that's very interesting. Extremely interesting. Because you must have been like hiding under a rock the whole time. Because anywhere you go, in any campus of any university, of any high school, the enemy is not outside the walls. The enemy is within. And that's the big problem. Because as parents, we know how to build walls around our communities. We know how to build walls around our schools to protect our kids. But what happens when the enemy is inside the walls? What do we do then? Because we're not ready for that. We're not ready for knowing that the dealer is sitting right next to your kid in homeroom. And we're talking 8th grade here. We're not talking senior. We're not talking junior. We're talking 8th grade. And there's the dealer sitting right next to your kid. The dealer is coming to your house. He hangs out with your kid, comes to pool parties. The dealer is not hiding on the other side of the tracks. He's not behind the dumpster in the school wearing a hoodie saying, hey kid, you want to get high? That's not what it is anymore. And for some reason, parents think that's the problem. If I can keep my kid, I hear this all the time, away from that kid, that's the bad kid. It's always the other kid. That kid belongs to somebody. I got news for you. That kid has parents, brothers and sisters. That kid is just like your kid. But no, they're like, no, you don't understand. My son would not be doing this if he wasn't hanging out with that kid. My daughter would not be doing that kind of behavior. She wouldn't be wearing those clothes if she wasn't hanging out with that girl. I got news for you. These kids don't need friends to get these ideas. These ideas are coming through your house, through the internet. They're reaching your kids through the internet. There's no way to keep this information away from your kids anymore. And I'm talking about kids as young as 6, 7, 8 years old. You understand that? I mean, people think that, okay, well, I want to get a nanny for my computer, and I'm going to protect my kids from getting on these websites. No, these kids know how to go on that computer and get past those nannies in 2 seconds. They figure it out. Because that they have a lot of information about. And that works. Information in that area works. In school, it works. But when it comes to life, information doesn't work. If you don't marry it with knowledge, if you don't marry it with, with experience, you don't have knowledge. And that's what parents are for. You know, and I can't tell you how many times I have to deal with a situation where, you know, one parent says one thing and another parent says another thing. One parent says no, the other one says maybe. One parent says yeah, absolutely not, and the other one says okay. You know, one parent says you're grounded for a week, and then the other parent says, oh, it's been 3 days. I can give you a break. You know what I'm saying? And that's, I mean, what you're doing is you're sending mixed messages. And this is a tool. If you want a tool to deal with your kids, if you want a tool that's very effective in dealing with kids, it's called consistency. Okay? Say what you mean what you say, but don't say it meanly. You don't have to scream. You don't have to yell. You just have to say, no, you're not going to alter. Simple as that. But you don't understand how my friends are going, no. Today, no tomorrow, no next week, no when I get a call from grandma, when I get a call from grandpa, when I get a call from your aunt, from your uncle, because they're all going to try to convince me that I'm wrong and that you're right. Because you already went out there and recruited all these people and you send them, you know, to me so I can change my mind. So as a parent, if I do that, I'm failing my kid. If I say no, I mean no. And I mean no today, and I mean no tomorrow, and I don't care what happens in between. Because all kinds of things will happen. Kids are extremely creative about this stuff. You know, you punish your kid, and trust me, he's sitting there, you know. I mean, if they use this kind of process for algebra or for calculus, they'd be geniuses. They'll sit there for hours trying to figure out how they're going to get away from this punishment. How can they? First, they try to minimize it. They do it in stages. It's not like they're going to come in and say, take the punishment away. That doesn't work. They're going to come in and they're going to chip at it. You know, these kids are pros at this. They'll chip at it. Well, Mom, you said a week. Okay, well, let's say 6 days. That's reasonable enough, right? They give you a reasonable number. And with that reasonable number, if you bite on that, then they take you to the next level, and then the next level, and the next level. And kids have an incredible amount of energy, an infinite amount of energy that you guys don't have as parents. So a tool that you have to understand and you need to have is realizing you have limitations. You don't have all the time in the world. You have jobs, you have other kids, you know, you have house chores, you have all kinds of things going on. You don't have time to go toe-to-toe with a 14-year-old. I do that all the time. You know, but I've been doing this for 20 years. You know, I use this energy against them. You know, they sit there and they come at me, and boy, they got it all figured out when they come to my office. You know, they have a plan. Because, you know, they know they're going to Marino, so they had a plan. Because they heard from their friends, watch out with that guy. Because they know that they're not going anywhere. So they come in there and they have this plan, and they tell me all this information that I want to hear, but they only tell me 10% of the problem. And that's another big problem with information and parents. Another tool you have to understand and you have to have. When the kid tells you that they're using drugs, they're only telling you 10% of the problem. When a kid tells you they're drinking, they're only telling you 10% of the problem. They're being honest because they believe that that's what you want. And they believe by being honest with you, you're going to reciprocate, you're going to give them what they want. But they're not being honest. You know, first of all, kids don't even know how much is too much when it comes to drinking. They have no idea. Kids drink, it feels good, they drink more. You know, they don't care. They don't have the information that we have. They don't have the understanding that we have. They don't have the, you know, the experiences that we have to make these determinations about drinking. They don't. You know, they tell you, oh, Mom, I had 1 beer. You know, just multiply that by 5. You know, I've never seen a kid drink because it tastes good. I've never seen a kid say, oh, that was very good quality beer. You know, it must have been brewed in, you know, in Germany and processed. You know, no, they drink to get drunk. That's the idea of drinking for kids. You know, they don't sit there and sip wine like we like to think. You know, I hear this all the time. Oh, in other countries, you know, kids drink wine at the dinner table. You know, it's very common. Yeah, it's very common back there because, you know, kids rather have Kool-Aid or Coca-Cola than wine because wine, if it's not connected to partying, it's not worth it. They don't sit there and sip it and, you know, gargle it and try to figure out what vintage it is and all that. They just pound it because it feels good. So kids drink to get drunk. They drink to get high. They use alcohol the same way they use pot, the same way they use coke, the same way they use heroin, the same way they use pills. They use it to get high. And that's what I mean about information. If you know this, that a kid uses alcohol to get drunk, and you know that when a person gets drunk, what happens? They get intoxicated. And intoxication means what? Just like any other kind of intoxication. Whether it's food poisoning, or whether it's some type of medication you took that you had a bad reaction, you become intoxicated. All kinds of things happen. And one of the things that happens is that alcohol kills brain cells. It does. Obviously, if you're a social drinker, and we hear this term a lot, I love it when kids try to tell me they're social drinkers, because I don't even know what that means. At 15 years old, they go, I drink socially. I'm like, do you understand what that means? And they're like, of course, Every time I go somewhere and somebody's having a drink, socialize. And if you're having a drink, socialize. And you're having a drink, socialize. That's social drinking for them. But it's not. Social drinking is defined by 1 or 2 drinks once or twice a month. So if you add that up, that's about 24 drinks a year. That's social drinking. That's the way it's defined. You see, these kids drink 24 drinks in one sitting. That's pounding. That's getting inebriated, hammered, destroyed, to use their terminology. And when that happens, the next morning, the hangover is the body's, response to that, inebriation, and the impact on the brain is tremendous. I can't tell you how bad that is for a kid whose brain is not fully developed. Because we used to believe that brains develop by 18. I don't know why we believe that. Because, people used to go to college till 22, 200 years ago. Before PET scans and CAT scans, we should have figured it out. But they stopped going to college at 22 for some reason. Because their brain stopped growing. So there was no more interest in going to college. But we never had that figured out. We needed a PET scan and an MRI to tell us that the brain was still growing to age 22. That's why the drinking age is 21. Then I get these stories about, oh, you can go get shot in Iraq and Afghanistan at 18, but you can't drink. You see? And they think it has to do with government regulation and demand trying to control us. This is what I hear all the time from these 15-year-olds. They have incredible imaginations. And I tell them, no, it has to do with brain development. And, it has to do with the fact that if you put alcohol in a brain that's not fully developed, you're going to do a lot of damage. If you put alcohol in a liver that's not fully developed, you're going to have a lot of damage. And that's what you do when you give a 14 or 15-year-old alcohol. You create damage. Damage to vital organs that eventually, if you do it consistently enough for a long period enough of a time, you're going to have permanent damage. And that's why we have so many people in this world that are living under bridges, talking to garbage cans. Those people have organic damage. We call that wet behind the ears, in our business. There's 3 stages of alcoholism. There's early stages, middle stages, and too late. Middle stages and late stages, and there's a stage called too late. Those are the people we're talking about. You can't do anything about it anymore. They have done so much damage to their brain that they can't recognize reality anymore. That could happen to an adolescent in a very short period of time. Why? Because their brain is not fully developed. Their liver could only metabolize 1 ounce of alcohol per hour. This is the information they need. See, when you talk to kids at this level, they understand. Parents, just have 2 words, yes and no. And that's the conversation. It's like, the kid says, but Mom, what about this? And, weed, and they're smoking weed in California, and it's legal. And it's not. It's not legal in California. It's not legal in Amsterdam. It's decriminalized in these countries. And it's legal because a state has a right to say it's legal. But the federal government, which supersedes state law, says it's not. And the federal government of the United States says that marijuana is illegal. Simple as that. So at any point, and they're doing it now in California, the federal government is walking in and saying, you're doing something illegal, and we're shutting you down. You know, so it is illegal, and kids need to know this. They need to understand this. So as a parent, you have to arm yourself. You know, your personal arsenal of weapons needs to be information about state laws, because that's what they're going to use. And if they come to you with an argument that's strong enough, and they beat you, you're going to walk around thinking he's right and you're wrong, and that's a big problem. It's a huge problem. Another big problem I see out there, and I talk about this a lot, is that, you know, your kids, especially when they're 12, 13, 14 years old, and they're going to people's houses, and they bring up this whole sleepover thing, you know what I'm saying? You got to be careful, because a lot of those parents are getting high too. A lot of them. I can't tell you how many of them are getting high. A lot of them. You know, a lot of kids get high with their parents' stash. They go and they grab their parents' stash, and that's how they start getting high. You see, that's sad. Talk about the enemy within. Forget about the school, forget about the community, what about the house? You know, so if you're sending your kid to stay over somebody else's house, you better know those parents well. And that's what Informed Families does. It gives you tools to go out there and to know who you're dealing with. That's critical. That's extremely critical. Because those people are going to be with your kid at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when an emergency pops up, and usually that's when emergencies happen. And if that person is stoned, because they said, oh, this is what I hear all the time from the adults. Listen, you know, I work all day, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, when I like to get home, I like to relax, you know, roll up a fatty, you know, pull out a bowl, a bong, and I like to just get high. And it's no big deal. And I go, yeah, but you got a 6, 7-year-old. What happens if they have an emergency at 3 o'clock in the morning? You got to run, jump in your car. You got to get out there and fix the problem, but you're high. You know, you're like, whoa, this is way too much information happening at 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, you're not thinking straight. And you're breaking the law. And you're sending the wrong message to your kids. This is all very critical. Because your kids are going to make decisions based on what you do. So as a parent, you have to understand that you cannot say out of the one side of your mouth that you're a law-abiding citizen, and out of the other side of your mouth say, hey, you got a lighter? It's like to spark up my bowl. I mean, you can't do that. You know, you can't go and serve alcohol to underage kids. I mean, I see that all the time. You know, parents are like, oh, my kids are having a party. But it's okay, you know, they tell me it's a barbecue. You know, it's a pool party. You know, and then you get there and it's like 5 kegs, kids, you know, drunk out of their mind, you know, running around the swimming pool, slipping and, you know, falling down, and, you know, all kinds of problems are going on. And where are the parents? Well, they don't want to be there, because if they're there, the kid doesn't like that. If they're there, the kid is going to look like, you know, like a fool. So, Mom, you got to hide. Dad, you got to hide in your own house. You got to use camouflage, you know, to get around. So, again, why are you doing this? You know, because you want to be your kid's friend? You know, don't you have your own friends? I tell parents all the time. My kids used to tell me all the time, you know, used to confront the hell out of me, because I was like that. I was like, no, it ain't going to happen. And he would be like, Dad, I hate you. And I was like, soon you'll get over it. Dad, I'm not going to talk to you. You're not my friend. And I'm like, I got my own friends, buddy. They're my age, you know. I don't have friends that are 14 years old, you know. So, you know, he didn't have a good relationship with me at that time, and I was okay. I was ready for that, you know. Now we have a great relationship. Now he's 26 years old. We have a beautiful relationship. Now he calls me all the time. Every decision he makes, he calls me, you know. Every time his colonel dresses him down, because, you know, he's a captain in the Air Force, and they just tear him to pieces, because they do that. Just because he's got 2 bars across his hat doesn't mean that he's, you know, they sometimes grab him and they put him in his place, you know. He calls me up and he's like, Dad, I can't believe this happened, blah, blah, blah. And he cries to me, and I'm like, okay, you know, it's going to happen. So he reaches out because we have a relationship. Why? Because he's not calling me from a crack house. He's not calling me from a shooting gallery. He's not calling me from jail. He's calling me from a place where he likes his life right now. You know, and I had to pay the price for that. I had to be the bad guy. You know, I always tell my wife, you know, you enjoy that, the whole adolescent thing, you know. You know, I enjoyed when he was a baby, because I didn't have to deal with all that stuff. She took the brunt of that. But when he was an adolescent, I took the brunt of that. It was my job to keep him in line, and he hated it. And he was smart enough to use all the tools against me. But I said no, and I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay with him hating me for 4 or 5 years. Because today, he doesn't, you know. So information is critical, tools that you guys need to go out and you need to find them. They're out there. You know, organizations like this that provide information is invaluable to know this stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up. Any questions you have about anything, any drug? I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm pretty much bulletproof when it comes to, you know, people walking into my office and saying, let me tell you something you've never heard before, you know, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've heard it before, many times. So any questions here, any questions from the computer? Just go ahead and ask. Go ahead.
I have a 4-year-old.
Right.
He's not yet in that stage. But I'm raising him on my own, and my family, but he doesn't, his father is not in this country.
Right.
And most likely he will not be seeing him often.
Right.
I've read about the fact that single mothers, their kids have more of a chance to use drugs. And I just wonder what's your advice for people, maybe because in the adolescence, the father takes, you know, somebody like you that can deal with that, and what do you do when you're raising your own?
Well, there's many single mothers in this country that raise kids and they never have that problem with drugs, you know. If you go into the, you know, urban cities in this country, you know, most kids are brought up by their mothers. You know, if you talk to many athletes, which I've talked to for many years, you know, they were brought up by their mothers. But, you know, these are mothers that had, you know, black belts, you know, and mothers who are very strong. And that's really what needs to happen. I mean, it's going to be difficult for you. You know, this kid is going to play on all your emotions, guilt, fears. You have a question?
No, I'm just saying, please repeat the question.
Oh, okay. I have
Bring up,
people
so
waving at me for a
make sure to
minute.
talk louder so the folks online can hear you too.
Yeah, the question was, she has a 4-year-old and she wants to know that she's basically raising him on his own because her husband is out of town or in another country, and, you know, and what can she do to keep this kid in line or keep him from going off track? And like I said, you know, it's a very common theme to raise a kid on your own, you know, and it's not impossible. It just takes a lot of energy and it takes a lot of work. And you got to start early on. I think that's critical. You know, these are all things that are formed through time. You know, development, child development is very interesting. You know, if you allow one thing to happen here, and 3 months later you want to change that, it's going to be very difficult. You understand what I'm saying? That's why I say, you know, you say what you mean what you say, you don't say meanly. It's not about screaming or yelling. A lot of people think that kids, for some reason, respond to that. I think they're immune to it. They spend the whole day screaming at each other. They even scream at each other on text. I mean, I hear text wars, you know, going on in schools. You know, kids fighting on, you know, Facebook fights. You know, so they're used to that. So it's not about, you know, screaming or yelling it. It's about saying no, very quietly. And when he comes back, you say no. And when he comes back, you say no. And when he comes back, you say no. And eventually, he's going to realize that it's no. You know, but if you back up one time, that's all it takes. If you back off one time from a kid, he'll never forget that. It's like an elephant. They got elephant memory when it comes to that. When it comes to taking out the garbage, they forget after 2 seconds. You take out the garbage, sure. You come back and you're like, there's the garbage. Oh, I forgot. But when it comes to you changing your mind about something like, you know, a punishment, they'll never forget that. They'll always go back to it. And you lose credibility as a parent. That's the last thing you want to do, is lose your credibility. You understand that? You're there for a reason. You're not there to be somebody's friend. You're not there to make a, have a relationship with your son or daughter where he's kissing you and hugging you all the time. You know, that's part of it. But there's another part of the job that requires you to be consistent, to be predictable, reliable, dependable. That's what makes a kid grow up in a safe environment.
I was just going to say that all of our research is now saying to us that we work with parents of children age 0 to 5, because the idea is it's not the child, it's the parent setting the rule and following through. And so if you do that and the child starts to know that right from the beginning, when they're 14 and 16, it's easier to continue. But we have seen in the last, I'm going to say 15 years, a trend where parents are not parenting those younger children. Well, they're parenting like, well, what do you think we should do, kind of thing. They're not parenting as the parent.
Parenting
So
by
that
committee.
becomes a very tough thing with a 13-year-old. Because believe me, a 13-year-old is geared to push every button you've ever had. So if you haven't been practicing back here at 4, at 13, you're probably lost. Because you're never going to argue with a teenager, because they are going to win if you haven't been doing this. And I want to say this, it isn't an easy thing. But if you see the consistency, and of course you've got some support systems. Support systems are fabulous. It's almost impossible to do all this without some support systems, because the moment your child tells you, well, everyone else is doing it, well, that's when you have to know. And I think like Ultra, I really didn't know. I mean, I thought maybe it was a music festival, but I didn't know it was a music festival with all the drugs.
Drug fest.
Drugs, right. So how do you know that? That's the important piece that you have to know.
All you have to do is just log on and watch Ultra Live. You'll see what I'm talking about. You're literally walking around, smoking blunts. I mean, they're on the computer. And these kids are walking around with their cameras. They're actually taking these videos and putting them on YouTube. So if you go to YouTube and you go Ultra Miami 2012, you might see your kids out there. You may not like what you see, but you will see your kids out there, because everybody's walking around with a video camera, videotaping and stuff. But again, that's knowledge and that's information. Let me tell you, the difference between life and death in any of these situations, it's all about knowledge. One little word that you pick up in the conversation that your child is having, either on their phone, on their computer, or just talking to a friend, something you overhear. Something like, we're rolling tonight. And you think it's rollerblading instead of, taking ecstasy. That could be the difference between life and death. So one word that you know as a parent, one piece of information that you have could change a child's whole life, the whole trajectory of that. Because they may not have done this yet. They may be planning to do it. But because you as parents don't have that information, they're going to do it. And guess what? They're going to like it. Because that's what drugs are. They increase the level of dopamine in your brain. It's not a mystery. That's why it's all called dope. Whether it's pot, alcohol, cocaine, heroin, it's all called dope. Because all it does is it increases the level of dopamine in your brain. That's all it does. No mystery. And when that level increases, you feel good. Whether it's shopping, eating, sex, whether it's gambling, whatever it is that you're doing to increase the level of dopamine in your brain, eventually you're going to become dope addicted. And that's what we call brain addiction. There's brain addiction and there's psychological addiction. That's where a lot of people get confused. But that's a whole other topic. You're asking a question?
Yeah, there's one person is asking what parents of college age kids can do.
Excuse me, I mean,
Okay.
What parents of college-age kids can do.
okay. The question is what parents of college-age kids could do, and I presume this is talking about drinking because everybody in college is drinking. And if you go to places like Tallahassee, the #1 business in town is alcohol. If you look at one of these distributors out there, if you want to make a lot of money, buy a beer distributorship in Tallahassee, because that's what's happening there. It's happening all the time. So as a parent, I can tell you what I did, because I had a child that went to college and went to law school. And this is the deal that I made with him, He said, I want to go to X school. I said, all right, now X school is going to cost me X amount of dollars. It's going to cost me a lot of work, including weekends. Okay, so this is the deal. If I go there to X school and I see you drinking, or I see booze in your room, or I see any type of behavior that has to do with drinking, you're coming back to X school in Miami. You know what schools I'm talking about, I'm not going to be paying for that. I'm paying already for this school. So this is the deal. You drink before you're age 21, we're done. Our deal is over. I'm not paying for your college. Make a choice. And this is about choices, right? This is all about choices. The more choice you give a teenager, the more trouble you have. Choices for teenagers should be A or B. Period. Don't give them all the colors of the rainbow because you're going to have problems. They don't have the ability to make good decisions. You know, I know people get shocked by this. But my kid is summa cum laude, and my kid is this, and he has all these awards. That's information. It has nothing to do with knowledge. Experience is what they need to have knowledge. So yeah, tell them to, you know, make the decision, tell them what the rules are, and then follow through. And if they decide they drink, they're going to do it on their own. They're adults. They can make choices, you know, but they're going to do it on their own.
Yeah, there's another person that wants to know the symptoms of an issue.
Symptoms of an issue? I mean, like I said, there's so many different ones that you can look at depending on what kind of drug you're dealing with, you know, whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs. The best thing to do is to go online, look at places like NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Addiction, and they have pages where you can go where signs and symptoms of different types of drugs are available. And also the terminology, because it's all geographical. Like the stuff that we call weed here in Miami is not called weed in California. You know, now they call it meds. This is the new term, which is very scary. You know, I'm going to go and I'm going to medicate. You know, I'm not going to get high anymore. I'm going to medicate. That's the new terminology. You had a question?
Is there an overgeneralization you can make as far as whether there is more drug use in the private schools, in the private middle schools and high schools versus public schools?
It's all about control. It's about how much control does a private school have over their environment. You know, a lot of private schools, unfortunately, give in to a lot of pressure by the parents and people that are on board members that are parents. And, you know, and their kids are the ones that are creating havoc in the school, but they can't touch them. That's a very bad policy of the school. You know, just because these people are great donors doesn't mean that they should be running the school. I think the principal should be running the school or the headmaster, you know. So, I'm always cautious about that because, like I said, all schools have drugs. I mean, trust me, the only place that there is no drugs on that I'm pretty sure of is Mars. You know, because we haven't had any man landings there yet. Only rovers are running around there. As soon as they get rid of the roller skate and they put a man up there, there'll be drugs up there sooner or later. But that's the only thing that I can say for sure. But there's drugs in every school, there's drugs in every community, in every country. I mean, I've been to Asia, I've been to Africa, I've been to China, I've been to India, I've been to all these different villages. You know, the first thing I was offered, which is very, very interesting, this guy offered me this, and I went to this village in India. And this guy has like a cow dung house, which is, made out of cow dung, and the thing dries up. I don't want to get into the specifics, but, I'm sitting there with this guy, and he pulls out this little gadget, which is like a piece of wood, and it has like two little, cloth things hanging from it. And I thought he was making coffee or something. I'm like, first of all, I'm not drinking the water. I told him that. Because he was taking it out of this little, thing, that was crossing through his property, a little trough, something like that. So I'm not drinking the water, so I'm talking to the interpreter, and I'm like, hey, I'm not touching that. And the guy's like, oh, but please, you're going to insult me if you don't take this. And I'm like, I'm not touching that. And he says, I go, wait a minute, what is it? He goes, oh, it's opium. I go, opium? What do you mean opium? He goes, yeah, it's these little wafers. Okay, these are people that live in villages that work all day, very difficult, hard lives. They wake up in the crack of dawn and they work physically, so their bodies are torn up. So they use opium to get rid of the pain. So this is like the first thing they do when they get home from work. Instead of smoking a bun or drinking a beer, they brew this opium they drink it. And the guy's like, oh, this is what it is. And I'm like, oh, I'm definitely not interested now. So I asked him, I said, because he looked like he was like 65, 70 years old. And I asked him, because I told him what I did, and the guy started laughing when he heard what I did for a living. And then I asked him, would he want help? If he knew that he can help was available. And he looked at me and he laughed. He's got cataracts covering his eyes. And he said, no, I'm too old. And I'm like, how old are you? And the guy's like, I'm 48. I'm like, what? Are you serious? And he looked to me like he was in his 70s, and he's like, And he goes, it's too late for me. But if I was younger, I may want help because I've had a whole life of being addicted to this stuff. And it's not cheap. This is a large part of what they make. They have to go out and buy this stuff. And there's dealers all over these communities that provide this stuff. So anywhere you go, the drugs are going to be there. The only defense you have for your kids is information, education. You know, I mean, let them make an informed decision. And like I said, don't assume that because your kid is smart and they have a high IQ and they have a whole bag full of, you you back up the truck on awards night every time, that the kid knows what he's doing. He doesn't. You know, he doesn't have the ability to make that decision. You have a question? Okay. Anybody else?
I just wanted to point out too that you're talking about private schools, and we have community action teams, which is where we send people into the schools. And you would think that, you know, it would be not the best schools, the private schools, but you see the real problem is that it's everywhere, and the kids in those private schools many times have more money. So the real problem is that they have access where, you know, kids in poorer schools and different circumstances really don't have that kind of access. But in those other schools, they have the wherewithal to find the drugs, and they're there. And I think our people in the schools say that there's problems in all the schools.
Yeah, and the difference is in one school they're snorting glue,
Yeah.
and in the other school they're snorting coke.
Right.
That's the only difference. You know, the same thing, they're getting high. And this is the problem. When a kid wants to get high, you're going to find out why. That's what I'm always interested in.
And what
Why?
do you hear when you ask them, why do you want to get high? What do they say?
A lot of them, like I said, you know, they say they want to get high because they want to experience it. You know, they want to get high because this is an experience they've never had. They're curious. A lot of them say they want to get high because all my friends get high. I mean, let me tell you something. Peer pressure, people talk about peer pressure. I talked about the guy with the hoodie in the parking lot of the school sitting by the dumpster. That's not peer pressure. That's not peer pressure at all. Peer pressure is when 4 or 5 of your best friends that you went to junior K with, and here you are now in 9th, 10th grade, are all smoking and you're not. That's peer pressure. I don't know any kid that can stand that pressure. I don't know any adult that can stand that pressure. It's impossible to deal with that kind of pressure. And I tell it to parents all the time. Those 5 kids are using and your kid is not, that means he's got to make a choice. I'm either friendless in Seattle or I smoke pot. So he thinks, what the heck, I'll just smoke pot, no big deal. I'll take a couple of puffs. And then he does, and he likes it. Again, dopamine, feels good, likes it. So then he tries it again. He tries it again, and the network begins to build. And this is all about networking. You know, kids who use drugs is all about networking. If you catch the kid before he builds that network, then you have a chance. Once he builds that network, it's almost impossible to get him out. Because, you know, everything now, you know, is on top of that. All his friends, all his activities, everything is connected to weed. You know, pot use or alcohol use starts off as 10% of your daily, you know, time, and that's not a big deal, right? 10% of the time is not a big deal, but then it becomes 20%, then it becomes 30%, then it becomes 40%, then it becomes 50%, and eventually you become dysfunctional. And that's what we talk when we talk about dysfunction of drug use. It's about frequency. The more you use and the longer you use, the less time you have to do anything else. If you're using 8 hours a day and you're working 8 hours a day and you're sleeping 8 hours a day, guess what? You're out of time. You can't do anything else. You can't maintain relationships, interpersonal relations. That's why many adults can't do that. A lot of people tell me, kids are famous for saying this to me. Oh, what are you talking about? I know this doctor who smokes weed all the time. The guy's awesome. You know, he's extremely successful. He's got this boat, he's got this house. And I go, well, how's he doing with the interpersonal relationships? He goes, oh, he's been married 5 times. Maybe there's a problem there. Why can't he seem to keep a personal relationship? Well, I'll tell you why. It's real simple. You start smoking pot at 14, guess where your emotional age is going to be for the rest of your life as long as you're smoking pot? 14. So now you got a 40-year-old, you know, hanging out in South Beach with a big belly and a gold chain, trying to pick up 19-year-olds, thinking that he's 15 years old. He's a teenager. Why? Because he started smoking when he was 15, 14, never emotionally developed. He developed physically, he developed mentally. So now you got a 40-year-old who's physically and biologically 40. He's 60 when it comes to mental capacity because he's been getting high since he was 14, and emotionally he's 15 years old. That's a big problem because they don't have any coping skills. They don't have any mechanisms to deal with relationships, to deal with consistency, predictability, reliability, dependability. That's what happens to a lot of your kids. A lot of the kids that use drugs, it's not that they're going to become killers or murderers or they're going to be robbing, Bank of America tomorrow. That's not what's going to happen. But they're going to start developing deficits. They're going to start falling behind in school. They're going to start falling behind, in their family relationships. They're going to forget about grandma. They're going to forget about their cousins. And they're going to be with their friends all the time. And little by little, they become isolated. And that network is what they have. You see? And that's why it's so hard to get away from them. Because once you try to do that, they don't have any of the other interpersonal relationships because they're gone. That takes time to maintain personal relationships with grandma, with granddad, with all these things. So that's what happens with these kids. Little by little, they become isolated, and then they get into this world where, when I get them, it's like an onion. They have like 1,000 barriers. Every time you peel one, here's another one, and you peel that one, and there's another one. Getting to the core of that problem is the big issue. Question, or you want to cut me off? Huh?
I think we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Anybody have anything else before we go?
What's the difference between brain addiction and psychological addiction?
Psychological addiction is usually the first phase of the problem. This is more with people and places and things, where it's fun to hang out with people that use drugs, and then eventually, little by little, you hang around with these people long enough. Like I said, sooner or later, you're going to do what they do. So that's the psychological part of it. Brain addiction is when you need it to be able to function. You can't function anymore. The brain is telling you, drink, it's like food. It's like if you're hungry, you're not going to be able to concentrate or focus on until you eat. And if you want to get high and you got a craving, you're not going to be able to do anything until you smoke. And that's what happens. Kids, they can't go to sleep because they need to smoke before they go to sleep, smoke pot. Their brain became addicted to that, and they can't sleep without it. So now, you get them on a trip, and the first thing they pack is the weed. You get them on a plane, they don't think like adults. They want to take it with them because it's like a life support system. So psychological addiction is just the primary phase, and that's where you want to get it. That's where therapy is very effective with. That's where treatment is extremely effective with. Once you get into the physical addiction, that's why I started working with adolescents to begin with. Because I felt that working with adults was not a waste of time, but it was a lot of wasted time before you get to the problem. The quicker you get to it, the faster you get to it, the better results you're going to have. And that's why information, I keep saying back and forth, is the most powerful weapon you have. Because one word, one text, one email that you see, and if you get the information, you can stop that process right there and then. If you don't, once the kid gets into his 20s and his 30s, good luck. He's going to be living in your house.
That's right. They'll be back at your house on your sofa.
I give you back Peggy.
Yeah. Well, tools and tips. Right here, right now we're in Lock Your Meds. We're in prescription drug. We do 4 big universal campaigns. And again, prescription drugs are the most abused drugs right now. Go figure. So, but we're just getting ready to move into safe homes, safe parties because it's prom and graduation season. And believe me, we've heard and seen it all. And I think our Catalyst, which is our newsletter, will have a cartoon on it of the child saying to the parent, "But I just need a credit card to make the deposit on the hotel room." And guess what? Parents really do that. They don't even think about, we're calling it legally, liably, or legally dumb. Come on, parents are responsible. That's what Safe Homes, Safe Parties tells you all about. And it just tells you simple things that you need to agree to and beforehand. This isn't new. This has been going on forever and ever. But every parent and every child thinks they're new, and they are. They're the They're the child and they're the parent. But you know, we can pass information on to parents and say, now they're going to say this to you, and when they say this, this is what you answer. But if no one ever tells you that, they win. So this is what you answer about the hotel room, you know, that you're not getting the credit card, you're not getting a hotel room. You have to be prepared to answer those things. So Safe Home, Safe Parties is going on right now. No, it starts in April. But this is Safe Home, Safe Parties, and we sure hope you'll participate with us. And what else was I supposed to tell you?
You talk about the music. You can ask them to
Oh,
put
the
something
new
on.
website. Oh, and Simone is responsible for this. The new website is fabulous. We have simplified it because we have so much information, we tend to tell people more than they want to know. And we have a part on our website that is for students, because we'd like to be able to talk to students, you know, and let them find out what they want to know, one for parents, one for teachers, and one for the community. So anyway, the website is fabulous. I hope it's just www.informedfamilies.org. I had it in front of a bunch of teenagers last night, and they liked it because it has a flash, you know, it keeps moving. So we've, you know, I would tell you this. Our message is the same as when we started 30 years ago. How we deliver it has to be a lot faster, has to be a lot different. And that's what I would say about parents and the skills you need to learn. They're the basics, and then how you deliver it. We're on Twitter and Facebook and all of those kind of things, and we can deliver those messages quickly. And that's what I think the message is for parents, too. Know what the information is, know what you want to say, get it down to something short and sweet. So come on our website, you can see that. We're here. Thank you for coming to this. Thank you for being online. This is our new thing. See, we're learning new things. And our goal is to network parents back together. Our big thing is called a parent peer group, because kids have peer groups, right? And if parents don't have parent peer groups, you'll lose, because other parents will support you. I mean, it's common sense, but we don't have anyone to support us. So just make sure you know your children's friends' parents, and we will help you organize. And I'm really excited about the new technology, because I know we all have limited time, but I think there are ways for us to connect together more effectively. We don't always have to be together, but we can keep our children, like Ultra. Now, I was thinking about that. How do we get that up on the website? How do we say, hey, this is happening this weekend. If your kid says this, you say this. Because, you know, somebody says, well, I think I'll go to the Ultra thing. Oh, well, isn't that lovely music outside? And I mean, you know, think about it.
YouTube.
YouTube, yeah. So we need to somehow tell them, when they say this, they can't go to Ultra.
What we can do is make a comment on there, but also post a link to the video. There's a movie that just came out that shows what Ultra is, and the kids on the beach, and the pounding, and the music, and all of that. So we can put that up there just so parents realize what's there. And you can find that on our homepage and probably in our parent resources section.
So we'll keep you posted, but thank you for coming. We love having you.
If you like what you've heard today, please. Also, if you like what you heard today, please make a comment on our Facebook page and our Twitter page. Share the information. Let everybody know that our lunch and learns are really great fun.